come subsequently. I have a lot of friends here. Uganda is my home. I claim it as such. And Africa is a noise in our blood, an echo in our bones in the Caribbean. And the strengthening of African and Caribbean unity is at the top of the agenda of my government and, of course, the people in the Caribbean and Latin America. In the foundation of the NAM, Kwame Nkrumah said that we look neither east nor west, but we look forward. We look to the future. It is a long time, a long journey, and through the vicissitudes of life and living and production, and all the changing scenes, we have arrived at a new inflection point in the evolution of human history. We are at a point where the complexities and challenges and the global turmoil, they're of such a nature that the old order can no longer hold, yet the new is yet to begin. And the NAM and the G77, the developing world, the South, we have a special role to play. We have been told by those who have dominated the world for quite a while that the central contradiction in the world today revolved on the question of democracy versus autocracy. Well, from the trenches of the Caribbean, that has never been the central contradiction, and it is not today. The central contradiction is about who gets what, when, where, and how. Who owns and controls the resources, and who determines the distribution of those resources. That is how it has been, and that is how it is today. And the restless South, justifiably, are demanding a better share of what the world has to offer. The poor, the marginalized, the disadvantaged. We are in quest for sustainable development, for peace. We want to see the climate change issues resolved. We want a better environment, a better future for our children and grandchildren. It is more difficult now for those who have been wedded to imperialism and hegemony to co-opt or to contain or to control those whom they consider the restless ones in the South. But there's a time and season for everything. And what we have to do, and we know it and we heard it in all the speeches, we have to work together in solidarity with one another and not allow ourselves to be divided as hitherto. And it is this solidarity around specific objectives which will bring about the upliftment of ourselves and all humanity. Peace, security, sustainable development, a good environment, and prosperity for all, not just a handful in a few privileged countries. We have under consideration issues old and new, some continuing. Cuba is here, heroic Cuba. Cubans gave their lives in the struggle for the defense of the independence of Angola. And at the Battle of Cueto Valley, when they defeated the racist South Africans in conjunction with the forces of the MPLA, and in the process assisted in opening the cell doors of Nelson Mandela. Yet Cuba, with all its sacrifices, are still today bombarded by unilateral coercive measures. It is necessary and desirable that this NAM restates its solidarity with Cuba and call for the end to the criminal embargo of this magnificent land of our Caribbean. We have been making strides. Recently, by our own efforts in the community of states of Latin America and the Caribbean, we have set a framework together through the Argyle Declaration in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a framework for peace between Guyana and Venezuela, and not to have open conflict. This is what we have to do in the NAM, this is what we have to do in the G77. Right before our very eyes, a terrible genocide is unfolding before us. The first genocide, the first televised genocide in human history. And yet, complicit nations in the West, in North America, in Europe, are arming and financing the forces in the Israeli government which are committing this horrendous act of barbarism. Surely, elemental humanity must demand that there be a ceasefire, and this should stop. You know, I was having a conversation with a woman who is not political. She was watching Al Jazeera and watching the slaughter of children, 10,000 in 100 days. And she said to me in an act of a cry of hopelessness, helplessness really, can't the world do something about this? And she burst in tears. Have we reached such a stage in our human condition that collectively we cannot be the conscience of the world and bring an end to this savagery against the Palestinian people? We are at an inflection point. History and contemporary circumstances have put the matter to us for a better world. I thank President Museveni for hosting this particular meeting and following with the South Summit tomorrow, the G77, for his extraordinary leadership in Africa. And I thank you for having us. I thank His Excellency, the Secretary General, for his boldness and outspokenness on the issues which concern humanity. Let us in the South join hands and hearts with progressive people across the world for a better life, a better world. Surely things can be brighter. Let's get on with it. Thank you.
I want to thank His Excellency Rodolfo Gonzalez for his remarks. I now invite His Excellency, the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Antonio Guterres.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, President Museveni, thank you for your warm welcome, and I congratulate Uganda on its chairmanship of the non-aligned movement. This movement began at a divided moment in history. In the midst of the Cold War, its architects, leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru, Joseph Broz Tito, Gamal Abdel Nasser and others worked to advance cooperation, supporting countries as they traveled the path to full decolonization, boosting trade and economic development in the Global South, and championing the pillars of peace, dialogue, diplomacy and cooperation. We see clear convergence between the principles of the UN Charter and the Bandung principles of the non-aligned movement. And you have an important role at the United Nations, as significant contributors to UN peacekeeping forces, as supporters of our work to uphold the United Nations Charter, international law and human rights, as champions of solidarity in times of crisis, including during and after the COVID-19 pandemic, and in your strong call for the elimination of nuclear weapons. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this summit falls at another moment of deep division. Geopolitical tensions are rising. Democracy is eroding while populism and extremism are increasing. Our climate is breaking down, poverty and inequalities are rife, and the developing world faces its weakest economic growth in decades. And more countries than ever are struggling with debt distress or default. Human rights, international law, the Geneva Convention and the UN Charter are being flouted with impunity. And conflicts are raging and proliferating from Sudan to Ukraine to Gaza. Following the abhorrent Hamas attacks on 7 October, the wholesale destruction of Gaza and the number of civilian casualties caused by the Israeli army in such a short period are totally unprecedented during my mandate. And this includes 152 of our own UN staff members, a heartbreaking tragedy for our organization, for their families, and for those they were serving in Gaza. While humanitarian workers are doing their best to deliver relief, they face constant bombardments, daily dangers to themselves and their families, and the enormous constraints posed by damaged roads, communication blackouts, and access denials. Meanwhile, disease and anger are deepening. People are dying not only from bombs and bullets, but from lack of food and clean water, hospitals without power and medicine, and grueling journeys to even smaller slivers of land to escape the fighting. This must stop. I will not relent in my call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire and the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. And we must do all we can to prevent spillover of this conflict across the region, in the West Bank, across the blue line between Israel and Lebanon, and in Syria, Iraq, and the Red Sea. Excellencies, the refusal to accept the two-state solution for Israelis and Palestinians, and the denial of the right to statehood for the Palestinian people are unacceptable. These would indefinitely prolong a conflict that has become a major threat to global peace and security, exacerbate polarization, and embolden extremists everywhere. The right of the Palestinian people to build their own state must be recognized by all. Excellencies, within this swirl of uncertainty and instability, I see new opportunities for countries and the non-aligned movement to lead. This meeting still points the way, deepening cooperation for shared global affluence. But what does that mean in practical terms? First, global affluence depends on peace. Peace means focusing on prevention, dialogue and mediation to heal divisions and diffuse conflicts. This requires institutions that reflect today's world, not the world of 80 years ago. And the UN Security Council is a prime example. The world's preeminent platform for resolving global disputes is paralyzed by geopolitical divisions that block effective solutions. Your movement has long highlighted the Council's systemic shortcomings and the need for reforms to make it truly effective and representative. How can we accept that the African continent still lacks a single permanent member? September's Summit of the Future is a unique opportunity to consider reforms to the institutions of global governance and promote ideas to rebuild trust and strengthen multilateral cooperation. The proposal New Agenda for Peace sets out a vision for preventing conflict, sustaining peace and advancing development. It reflects our commitment to all human rights, civil, political, economic, social and cultural. It includes initiatives around disarmament, tackling terrorism and transnational crime, and managing threats posed by lethal autonomous weapons and artificial intelligence. And it calls for a new generation of peace operations, including peace enforcement and counter-terrorism operations, led by regional partners, notably the African Union, with the Security Council mandate under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, supported by guaranteed funding, including through UN-assessed contributions. The Security Council's recent resolution on this issue is a major step forward, and one that your members, as well as myself, have long advocated. Second, peace requires sustainable development. We are moving backwards in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. People are going hungry. Communities lack access to health care, clean water, electricity, and proper sanitation. Families are struggling to make ends meet without social protection and safety nets, and children are denied education. Developing countries need resources to overcome these challenges. And this requires immediate debt relief and rechanneling unused special drawing rights. It means reforming an outdated, unjust and unfair global financial system that favors its founders, mostly rich countries, and has proven unable to provide a global safety net, in particular to developing countries in distress. It means all countries going the extra mile to allocate their budgets wisely, investing in education, health, nutrition, and social protection systems. And it means strengthening the social cohesion of societies and upholding fundamental human rights, recognizing the rights of minorities, and standing up to all forms of discrimination. At September's SDG Summit, world leaders adopted a political declaration that demonstrated clear support for an SDG stimulus of $500 billion per year. And they also supported our long-standing call for reform of the global financial architecture, including the Bretton Woods system, to better respond to the needs of developing countries, making it fully representative of today's global economy and not the one that existed after the Second World War. And at COP28, countries operationalized the long-awaited Loss and Damage Fund to support those countries most vulnerable to the devastation wrought by climate change. But contributions so far have been minimal, and developed countries have not yet fulfilled many of their long-standing commitments on climate finance. I urge the non-aligned movement to hold leaders to keep these promises this year. Excellencies, conflicts, poverty, inequality, geopolitical fragmentation, and climate catastrophe are the result of choices the world makes or fails to make. Guided by the solutions being discussed here, and the spirit of trust, understanding, and solidarity that is infused in NAM from the start, I know we can tackle these challenges together and make the right choices in the time ahead and I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, for his remarks, and I welcome here for the conference of today and tomorrow. As we close, we should remind ourselves of our motto for this conference, which was deepening cooperation for global affluence. This will be the first time, if it is achieved in the coming years, that the whole world is affluent. Until by 1980, the only affluent part of the world was Western Europe, North America, and Japan. The rest of the world were in poverty. In the last 50 years, we have 40-something years, we have seen spread of affluence to some other countries, China, some countries in other parts of the world, spreading affluence a bit more. And what we are aiming at is affluence for the whole world. We may not achieve it in a short time, but we should have it on the radar screen as our aim. In order to do that, we go back to our principles of NAM. And those principles, the Bandung principles, really start with humility, to be humble, not to think that what you think is the only way of doing things. In other language, we call that subjectivism. When you just think that what you think is the only way of doing things. The opposite of subjectivism is objective thinking. Objective thinking means you deal with situations the way they are, not the way they should be in your head. We who have spent, I have spent about 60 years, more than 60 years, engaged in the political resistance in Africa here. And in those years, we have been studying all these events in the whole world, actually. And we have got some good idea. If you look at the 500 years from the time of the Renaissance in Europe, even if you don't go back to the earlier periods, you'll find that ideas were coming, new ideas, then people discover better ways of thinking. We started off with Bullionism. There was a thinking in Europe that Bullionism is the correct way of building wealth. That is gold, getting gold and silver, and some of the countries did that a lot, but they ended up being not developed. I don't want to mention individual countries. Therefore, after some time, it became clear that Bullionism was not the source of wealth. Then there were some thinkers in France who talked of they were called physiocrats. Physiocrats believed that wealth was only in agriculture, that if you emphasize agriculture, you will be prosperous. But after some time, a man called Adam Smith came along and wrote his book in the year 1776 entitled The Source of the Wealth of Nations. Where does the wealth of nations come from? And he was able to show that by private effort, free enterprise, by specialization and exchange, you can create wealth for the country. He was more correct than the others, Adam Smith. Then Karl Marx came and said, no, private property is the source of all evil. We should get rid of private property and collectivize wealth. He had some good points in central planning, but obviously there were also some philosophical mistakes in his position. Now, Adam Smith helped Europe to move forward, but something else came up which he had not foreseen. This was the issue of the market. If you produce, who buys? If you produce and nobody buys, or very few people buy, you will not continue. That's how you go to the crisis in Europe of 1929, the collapse of the capitalist system, the depression. That's how now another thinker, Maynard Keynes, came along and said, you people, you forget the issue of aggregate demand. That even if you give money, free money to people in their pockets, they buy what is produced, it will help the economy. That's how the idea of the welfare state came, where to give money to people even when they are doing nothing. Now you can see just in that period, so many ideas coming, going, coming, going. This is the correct way. Instead of wasting, I really feel sorry for some of these people. They come to lecture, you lecture me, you don't know what you are talking about. So therefore, now, I'm glad we are all here. I want to assure you that we seem to be on the right way, unlike the other people who are full of themselves and think that the only way is the way they think. When we were busy in our political struggles, they would come and ask me, are you pro-East or pro-West? I look at these people. Sometimes I would want to use bad words, but I would restrain myself and to say, do you think I'm an idiot? I am pro myself, I'm not pro anybody. Why would you not have it in your head that this man or this group of people are pro their own interests? Why would you think that my job is to be pro this one or the other one, and I have no other job except that? That's really incredible shallowness. Therefore, it's good that this movement has been going on. We have the capacity to solve many of these problems if we cooperate among themselves, because remember we have been saying that wealth comes from producing goods and services and selling them. Now that means three things. Number one, investment to produce the goods or the services. A factory, a hotel, a transport business, that is either good or service produced. And we can cooperate here. Those people with some surplus capital can invest in our countries, and we produce goods and services, which means that the NAM governments must create conducive atmosphere for investments to take place. The NAM countries also sometimes make mistakes. Like here in Uganda. Uganda was moving very well in the 1960s. Then we had a man called Idi Amin. I don't know whether you heard of him. He was a soldier, a British soldier, poor, no education. He came and took over the government. We decided to fight him. But in a very short time, he expelled our Asians. There were Asian people who had come from Asia and settled here, especially India, Pakistan. This property here, this is a joint venture between the government and one of those people, one of our Indian origin people. Idi Amin expelled all this. And yet they were a very active investment group. They were in sugar, they were in hotels, they were in steel production. So here you had a leader of a NAM country undermining his own economy. So therefore, it is very crucial that we study very carefully the issue of the investment climate in our respective countries. When we kicked out all these people and we came into government, we brought back, we gave back the properties of our Asian citizens and non-citizens that Idi Amin had taken. We gave them back. We had a hot debate in Parliament. Some people saying this, some other. We said no, they must get back their properties. And they got their properties. And this one here is one of those people who came back as soon as he heard that we had given him. He came back from, he was in London. He came back here. And the other day I was asking our people, how many factories have been built by our Indian returnees? They told me 900 factories they had built since they came back. So this is one front line of struggle. The atmosphere for investors to produce goods and services using the raw materials we have in our respective countries. Now, once you produce a good or a service, then the next challenge is who buys what you produce. Somebody must buy it, and buy it in big quantities so that you continue expanding. That's why there is the internal market. Like Uganda here, we are a population of 46 million people, so they buy. But the internal market of Uganda is not enough. That's why we need the regional market, integration in East Africa, in Africa, so that we deal with the issue of the market regionally and nationally. But internationally, since we are members of the same group of countries with similar interests, we should promote trade among ourselves. Because when I buy from you, I'm supporting your prosperity. And when you buy from me, you are supporting my prosperity. And we shall, I don't know how the Secretariat is organized of NAM and on the G77 to bring ideas of how we can promote and expand interstate trade among the NAM countries. We, the Africans, have been supporting, we, the Ugandans here, have been supporting the prosperity of others from our pockets by buying what they produce. You hear that I have been around for a long time. By 1962, when Uganda got independence, I was 18 years old, and I was already active as a youth, and I was following everything. At that time, we were buying British products because we were a British colony. We would buy British cars, Bedfords, Morris Minor, Austin. I remember those vehicles. Range Rover, only British vehicles, British-made vehicles. When we got independence, our leaders started importing vehicles from France, the Peugeots, from Germany, the Mercedes-Benz, but especially from Japan. And we have been buying a lot of vehicles from Japan. But Japan are not wise traders. I told them, I said, you Japanese, we are enriching you with our pockets. We are buying your vehicles. All clans of Japanese vehicles are here. Pajero, I don't know which clan, the other clan, Mitsubishi. Why don't you come and assemble at least these vehicles in Uganda? They were not interested. Okay. I see you want to take blood from me. You don't want to give some blood to me. Now, we are making our own vehicles. I don't know whether these people can show those vehicles on this screen here. Have you got those pictures or you have failed? All those vehicles are electric vehicles being made by our people. And that's one of the factories where they are made. Now, my Japanese people came and said, no, we want to assemble vehicles here. Say, too late, sorry. I'm no longer interested in assembling. I now only want manufacturing here. If you don't want that, bye-bye. Those are now so therefore, the NAM countries should not be part of this blindness, thinking that I should only buy from you, you buy nothing from me. You should be the one I was telling the Japanese, since we are buying your vehicles, you should be coming here to even invest, for instance, in value addition for agriculture. Okay, I buy your vehicles, but you also help me in manufacturing cereals, manufacturing process, adding value to coffee, and so on. No, they were not bothered. Not bothered. This is not a good way. So number one, production of a good or a service. Number two, buying, marketing from one another. But number three, you cannot link the producer of the good and the service to the consumer without infrastructure. You need infrastructure. You need roads, you need the railway, you need the ports, you need the airlines to link the producer and the consumer. So all these are opportunities, areas of opportunities for all our NAM countries and the group of 77, who account for 80% of the population of the world. His Excellency Antonio Guterres has talked about financing. We are going to intensify our discussions with the BRICS, with all these other groups about the affordable financing. Affordable financing, where can we get this money from? If the Bretton Woods institutions, because we are Christians, and Christians believe in repentance and forgiveness. If the Bretton Woods institutions can confess their sins and repent, we can forgive them. And they have a chance. They have a chance. I give them some option that please, time to repent. We repent before it is too late. Otherwise, we are going to continue exploring for new ways of financing. And we can do it. We can do it. A country like Uganda lacks very little. The only thing we lack, apart from our people not knowing what to do, because they have not been woken up, the only thing we have not been having has been energy, fuel, but fortunately we found our own petroleum here, so soon we shall be pumping out our petroleum and refining it, and that means we have got almost everything here. An educated population, the people who are making those vehicles are highly educated Ugandans. So what we really need from our African brothers, which we have been discussing with them, has been the issue of the market. But financing, there are also ways of financing. You can get a group like the National Security Fund of Uganda. It has got a lot of money. But they invest it, I don't know where. So there are ways we can, all these countries have national security, social security funds, because I have seen them in a number of countries. How is this money used? But we are going to go for options of affordable financing. Now the issue of helplessness, I don't really think we are helpless. It is just because we don't get together. My testimony to the NAM conference here is what I have seen. By 1963, by 1950, almost all the African countries were under colonial control. Through the agitation and some fighting in Algeria, in Kenya, also in Vietnam, outside Africa, some of the clever imperialists started giving independence. And by 1963, when the Organization of African Unity was founded, only 36 countries had got independence. 20 were still not independent. Many of them are here. And our leaders went to Addis Ababa to say, please, give all the African countries independence. If you don't give them, we shall kick you out by force. And the colonial people thought the Africans were joking. What can they do? What can the Africans do? And the Africans organized themselves. Many of them are here. the liberation movements, supported by the frontline states, Tanzania, Zambia. Initially Tanzania was alone, then Zambia, then Botswana. Now, to cut a long story short, Frelimo started fighting in 1964, Angola, Guinea-Bissau, Zimbabwe, Namibia, South Africa itself, the African National Congress. Now, the war in Mozambique started in 1964. By 1974, the Portuguese Empire collapsed. By 1980, Zimbabwe got independence. By 1990, Namibia got independence. By 1994, South Africa was liberated. So, where was the helplessness? It is just because it was just ourselves. Much of the problem is internal, within us. If we don't organize ourselves well, because here you had three players. You had the liberation movements in each country, the frontline states, which were nearby, supporting, and the socialist countries in the Soviet Union and China, but also progressive groups in the Western countries. And that's how we kicked out the invaders by force, not by negotiation, or negotiation came later. So really, I don't think we are helpless. It is just we're not organized. How can we be 6 billion people? How can they be helpless? The ones who are helpless are the other ones, the other smaller group. But because we are not organized, we look helpless. But I can assure you, if we organize ourselves, we are not helpless. Now, finally, for our brothers and sisters from outside Africa, I want to mention to you that Africa has got huge potential. It is a huge continent, 12 million square miles. You can fit India into Africa 12 times, and India would fit there. But Africa is the origin of man. All of you here are are either Africans or former Africans. That's what I tell the Europeans. They just laugh. I tell them that all of you are former Africans. But until recently, the population of Africa was small. Because all human beings started here. And it is only 100,000 years ago that some human beings started going from Africa to other parts of the world, according to the literature we have. But the out of Africa population grew more than the in Africa population. Why? Because of the diseases here. This climate, the one you see outside, is good for us, but it's also good for our enemies. The mosquitoes, the tsetse flies, the what. So the population of Africa remained small. But with modern technology, with modern means, we are now able to control the enemies of man in Africa, the mosquitoes, the tsetse flies. Therefore, for the first time in human history, the population of Africa now has overtaken the population of India and of China, respectively. We are now 1.5 billion, and we shall be 2.5 billion in the next 30 years. So now this huge population of Africa and of young people, once they are educated, they are a big production force, but also a consumer force. So therefore, I want to share this with our brothers from other parts of the global south, plus China, that Africa is now becoming more and more, has always been, but is becoming more and more area of opportunity. In the past, it was a source of raw materials, a little bit of also market, but now it has everything. The raw materials, the production force, the consuming force. So bear this in mind. There is insecurity here, insecurity there, but when we get together, we can solve those problems. They only become unsolvable when we don't work together. As you can hear, even by 1970, a lot of Southern Africa was in chaos. Mozambique, Angola, and so it was in war. But now Southern Africa is totally peaceful, except for Congo. Therefore, even insecurity will be controlled. And I would want to just conclude by telling our brothers and sisters from outside Africa that please, Africa is becoming more and more an area of economic opportunity. Some years ago, I got some good investors from, I think it is Indonesia, who wanted to invest in palm oil. We were importing a lot of palm oil from Malaysia, from Indonesia. They came and invested here in the islands. That lake there has got many islands. They came and invested in the island there. Now we are producing quite a bit of our needs of the palm oil which we need for making soap and all that is now being produced here. So therefore, opportunities are plenty. I'm glad you came. If you have time, you can stay around and see more of Uganda. In some ways, it is representative of some of other parts of Africa which are peaceful. So with these few words, I declare the conference closed, and I wish you a good travel back to your country. Thank you very much. Conference closed.
Parohamia is partly the monitor. The monitor would keep the environment and